Hi, I'm Matt, lead developer on IDPicker. In this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate importing data into IDPicker 3. In this case, I'll be importing output from MirrorMatch in the form of pepxml. First step is to open IDPicker. Then I go to File, Import to open the import dialog. Using the tree view in the left pane, or the text box at the top, I navigate to and select the location for my pepxmls. The right arrow button tells IDPicker to search the selected location for importable files. At the bottom, there's a Sources of Type combo box. It controls what kind of files are included when I click the right arrow button. The Search Subfolders checkbox controls whether the search includes subfolders of the selected folder. Since I'm only interested in pepxmls right now, I selected that as the source type. When I click the right arrow button, IDPicker finds the pepxmls and quickly looks inside them to determine what spectrum source it corresponds to. By spectrum source, I mean a single MS run like a thermo raw file. More than one pepxml can correspond to the same spectrum source. For example, searches with different software or different parameters. To ignore a node, I can either select it in the right pane and remove it with a left arrow button, or just uncheck its checkbox. I can select multiple locations and move each one over with the right arrow button. When I have all the data I want to import selected in the right pane, I click Open. Or if I have cold feet, I could click Cancel. Try them both and see what works for you. I may get a couple prompts right after clicking Open. This one is telling me that some of the pepxmls already have corresponding individual IDPDBs. If the pepxmls haven't changed since the last time I imported them, and I don't want to change the import criteria, I can skip reconverting them. For now, I'll reconvert them though. Because I'm importing multiple pepxmls and creating a single merged IDPDB, IDPicker asks me where to save the merged file. The default location and file name is usually the longest common prefix of all the input files, or the parent directory name. The next step checks every pepxml to determine the protein database and analysis parameters that were used to create it. When that's done, I get this import settings dialog. I'll explain the columns now. Remember I said that multiple pepxmls can correspond to the same source due to different search software or parameters? Those differences are captured by analyses, and each one shows up as a row here. I might want to compare two versions of MirrorMatch in a single report, compare searches with different cleavage rules, or accumulate matches from MirrorMatch, Pepitome, and Mascot. IDPicker is designed to handle all these cases. Each analysis usually corresponds to many pepxml files. In this case, the versions of MirrorMatch used were inconsistent. This may need to be fixed for the sanity of people who look at my report. The analyses are given default names depending on what actual differences were found. If only software version differences were found, the name only needs to be the software name and version. If there were differences in parameters, IDPicker will automatically put the contrasting parameters in the name. I can expand the analysis by clicking the arrow to see all the parameters. Contrasting parameters would be helpfully highlighted in red. In any case, I can change the analysis names to whatever I want, but they really should be unique. Next is the database column. IDPicker requires access to every protein database used by the search engines at the time of import. If it can't find a new database in the previous location, or in this protein database search path, which I'll talk about later, it will be highlighted in red, and IDPicker won't let me continue until I find it. However, I can choose a different database if I think it's similar enough to the search database to be used as a substitute. The important thing is that all the peptides that the search engine found can be found in the selected database. If that is not the case, IDPicker will give me an error about unmapped peptides. To change that error into a warning, I can check the Unmapped column, which means ignore unmapped peptides. Both the error and the warning will tell me how many peptides couldn't be mapped. If it can't map a few peptides, it's no big deal, but if it can't map 1,000 peptides, I'd be missing a lot of my data. Next is the decoy prefix column. IDPicker depends on the target decoy search strategy to calculate FDR and filter out unreliable identifications. Decoy protein accessions must be indicated by a prefix, and IDPicker needs to know what that prefix is. For bumbershoot tools like mirror match, this is usually done auto-magically. If for some reason that doesn't work, or for other search engines, the default value can be configured in the options menu that I'll talk about in another tutorial, or overridden in these cells here. There are two ways to reduce the size of the imported data: max rank and max FDR. All hits ranked worse than the max rank, or with an FDR worse than the max FDR, will be completely excluded from the report and can't be recovered by changing the basic data filter later. The defaults are reasonable for medium-sized datasets, but for huge datasets I'd consider being more strict and only keeping the top rank, or top 5% FDR. The last column, convert settings, should only be modified if I'm importing searches from an engine that IDPicker doesn't have built-in support for yet. I won't go into it for this tutorial. Once everything is set, I click OK and watch the magic happen. Depending on how many files I'm importing, I may go get a snack, go home for the day, or maybe even do some other work. That's it. Now you know how to import files into IDPicker 3, and knowing is half the battle.